Fox News alert from Thailand. 4 of the soccer players trapped in a cave were successfully rescued in a complicated and dangerous trek that included swimming more than a half-mile in total darkness. The mission to save the remaining young people and their soccer coach expected to resume later today.
The 4 boys have been taken to a hospital where they're recovering from a 2-week ordeal. So what are the long-term physical and emotional effects on them? Joining us now is Dr. Michael Bodden, forensic pathologist and a Fox News contributor. Dr. Bodden, very glad to have you here to answer some crucial questions that I think a lot of people are asking. So we'll get to the effects of the boys who are still behind. Let's first, if we could, talk about those who have been taken to the hospital. What will they be checking for, and sort of what could have happened to them in transition?
Right. They'll be immediately checking for dehydration, loss of weight, oxygen levels, all of which can be corrected very easily. They'll also be checking for infections because if they have, as you saw on some of the tapes, they're putting mercurochrome or iodine on the soles of the feet because these kids could have bruises and cuts on their feet where they're walking and other parts of the body, and they can get infected. And there may be bugs down there that are more infectious than the ones we're accustomed to. So they'll be checking for infections and pneumonia. And they should do very well physically. Emotionally and mentally, it's hard to predict. Most young kids like this who have been in a pretty supportive environment, even though they were under the cave, and who appear to be acting appropriately from the videos that we have seen, respond very well. And I'm sure they'll have psychological and emotional support in addition to their families. So the outlook, I think, is very good for all or most of these kids, physically and emotionally, the ones that have already come out.
And then now we want to talk about the ones who are still left there, because we were talking to you earlier, Mike and I both, about the oxygen levels. And if you want to take that over, Mike.
And kids this age, 12 to 16 or so, eat like weeds because they're growing. Right. So the lack of proper nutrition, lower oxygen, what's the impact on them?
The oxygen is the critical part right now. Remember in the Chilean 2010 disaster where they had 33 miners confined for 69 days, they were able to get a shaft down and they were able to put oxygen down. Right now, we're breathing 21% oxygen. When it goes below 19%, we should start getting woozy because the brain uses up about 25% of the oxygen we're breathing in. So when there's a lower oxygen, it's the brain that gets affected. And if it gets down to 15%, which is what they're stated so far in the environment, the person can become very disoriented and unable to move properly, which becomes increasingly more important
to rescue them. Right.
And if it gets below 10%, deaths can occur with unconsciousness, convulsions, all because of the lack of oxygens. They've tried to get a pipe or a shaft down, but they couldn't do it the way they did it in Chile. So, and the oxygen in there is just being used up by them all the time they breathe.
And it's our understanding, because it's such a narrow path that they have to go to get to the kids, it's going to be almost impossible to bring in oxygen tanks or something like that, right? So
they're having difficulty with that.
Right. So given those conditions that you just pointed out and the need for oxygen and higher oxygen levels, how much time do the rescuers have to get these boys out there to safety without having lots of damage to their brain?
Lots of physical as well as emotional damage to the brain. That's tricky. It depends how high the water level is, because what they've said is that they've been able to reduce the water level a great deal, so maybe oxygen can go in. But now it's raining, and they can't stop in a cave like that water from coming in from all different sides and raising the levels. So they probably have just a few days to be able to get them out safely. I would think that they got the strongest 4 out first to see if it'll work. So there are a lot of different, it's 11 to 16-year-olds, then the 11-year-olds are going to be in the most jeopardy.
Dr. Bodden, what's the impact on the guys who are left behind in terms of finding out that their teammates made it out safely? Is that a huge lift for them?
That's a huge lift. That's a huge lift. And the communication with the parents is a huge lift. And that means they can do it. So that's a great impact. The emotional toll, it looks like the scout, the guy in charge.
Yeah, the soccer coach.
He's handled them very nicely while they were confined for 10 days until they were rescued. And he also is he's probably the one who's most at risk from emotional disturbance and PTSD
Well, yeah,
or
because
something.
he also brought them there.
That's right. There's guilt feelings.
Yeah.
There's and he's apparently given over a lot of his food and thing to the kids. So
I thought it was interesting. You said that you probably think that they got the stronger boys out first to see if it works. Is that because they're strong enough to help assist? Or why do you say that?
Well, I think strong enough not to panic. You see, the thing is, as can happen, when you can't breathe, you suddenly stop panicking, even though you have enough oxygen in you, and that's why people drown in the open. People who suddenly can't swim quite well, and they panic when the rescuers come, and they can pull the rescuers down.
Flailing,
so
yeah.
it would put the divers at risk also. If they attach to a diver and they start panicking because there's a momentary time when the mask isn't working, when they're squeezing through a passage or something. So it's a danger for both the kids and the rescuers.
Anything we haven't asked you that you'd like to point out?
Well, just the appreciation, as we said, the importance of oxygen. We take it for granted, right, because we got 21%, but if it goes lower than that, as in fires sometimes, then the person gets confused, hallucinating, and doesn't function in a way that's helpful.
But you still, like all of us, but you're coming from a different perspective. From your perspective, you remain hopeful, though, right?
Hopeful, and once they get out, they'll be okay. 11 to 16, it's amazing how much injury and all they'll bounce back from. That's the good thing about being young.
So many good things about being young. Dr. Michael Baden, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Very important.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.